Hello. In my last video, I discussed the topic of white Americans who have Black African ancestry, myself included. I'll leave a link to that video below. Today, I would like to talk about another very sensitive topic dealing with race, and that is the racism that many of us encountered from our older relatives. In my case, it was Southern, white, Gen X. I lived for 40 years in suburban Atlanta, and then now 11 years in the Pacific Northwest. And I'll give a couple of examples of what I encountered in the family setting. In third grade, I was transferred from a mostly white, lower middle class elementary school to a middle upper elementary school in the neighboring district. And that school had a lot of Black kids. It was called M to M, majority or minority to majority, where they were bused in from other parts of the county. Our neighborhoods were not integrated, and so they came by bus. And so they were probably maybe 35 or 40% of my class. And not long after I had been in that school, this one older relative said, "Watch out for these Black kids. You know, they're not clean like we are. They don't bathe like we do." And I immediately, even though this was a very close family member, I knew that wasn't correct. I had already been playing with these kids. They were becoming my friends, and I knew that wasn't right. But it was kind of hard to talk back to an older relative. I just said, that's not true. That's not how it is with the kids that I know. So in that moment, this older relative probably had much less experience in her long life of dealing with Black peers than I already had after a few months. And I think about the people that hear that sort of thing, but then can't disprove it through their own experience, and they continue to believe the lie that she was believing, and that probably was told to her many, many, many decades before. Another example was a male older relative who absolutely never, in 25 years that I knew him, never had one nice thing to say about Black people. Never. It was very negative about the civil rights movement, used the N-word continually, never ever made an attempt to use any other word. I mean, it was bad, and that wasn't good for the World War II generation to be passing that sort of toxicity and hatred onto anybody, especially young people then, which was Gen X. And so my question is, what do we do in our hearts regarding how we feel about these older relatives, many of whom have died? Do we give them a pass and say, okay, they were people of their time, that's what they were exposed to, you know, that's just how people were then? Or do we separate out the positive feelings that we had for them in other areas? I mean, if they were otherwise good relatives, but then they had this hate and this toxicity, can we separate the two out and say they should have done better? There were plenty of examples of white peers for them that had progressed beyond the hatred, and they would not have had to have looked hard or long and hard to find that. So how have you encountered this in the family setting? What do you do about it? And how can, the most important thing is, how can we make sure that absolutely nothing that we got subjected to um, is passed down through us to our children or our grandchildren, and that this fully ends and doesn't get passed down anymore in the Southern white culture. So, what can we do?